Oh, another week, another lively discussion, and we can't wait to have it with you. South Star Classroom on the other side. Oh, welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. That's Jubilee. That's Omar. Hopefully, our beard of wisdom / knowledge, still don't know which one it is, by the way. Hopefully, he'll be joining us soon. I am Charles, but we are in for a treat because you know what, Omar? I'm not hosting today, and you're not hosting today. Somebody else had a topic.
Somebody's hosting, man.
And we're going to hand that thing off to that person. So take it away, Ms. Ransom.
Well, what do we have here? It's the South Star Classroom back in action. So all we want to know is DEI dead? DEI has been drugged, dragged, all the things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do that, you know how I feel about connecting with people. So let's check in real quick. Let's see who can keep it the most succinct. That's Charles. Charles don't like when people talk too much about their feelings.
I ain't saying nothing. I ain't even say nothing.
You know, listen, I just had
Talk about that dog, man.
I almost made it without doing a Charles thing, and you know what? All right, let's start with Omar Yanar. How you doing?
I am doing really well. Happy New Year to everybody. I was out last week, just really excited to see everyone. The semester is back in action. I am always traveling and going about the country and the world, but I am excited to dive into this topic because I got some opinions on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
That's what's up.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, and we can't wait to hear those opinions. How you doing, Beard of Wisdom? Can you please clarify, because we're always using the titles interchangeably.
We don't even know.
Is it beard of wisdom, beard of knowledge, the beard that has wisdom and knowledge? What are we going to do here?
It was knowledge. That was the original
Got it.
The original
name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I will forget next week, but got you. Beard of knowledge / wisdom.
See, there you go. It was Alonzo right there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm good. Great topic today. I have a lot of thoughts. I'm sure we all do. But work has been really picking up. I'm kind of at the stage now where it's about working independent. You have a bunch of different clients and they have different needs, and there's only so much time in the day. So I'm starting to get to that point, which is a good problem to have. So work has been good. And fun fact, we had yesterday in San Diego, since they started tracking rainfall, we had our 4th ever rainiest day yesterday. It was insane.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. Cars are floating in the street, that whole thing. Yeah. But it's sunny today.
I mean, that's a drastic change. Cars floating in the streets is sunny today. All right, Doc, the Doc. How are you today?
I'm tired, but it's a good tired. Been really busy. David and I we're locking step on that work thing, man. Beautiful thing happened though. Another $50,000 went out in Indy by the Mind Trust off of their Go Farther literacy fund. And that started from a fund that I started in Oakland called the People's Literacy Fund. And we gave out 100,000 here. But in all, from that idea, we've only given out 100, but in total, about $280,000 is going out directly to community members that's improving literacy on their own or has ideas and things like that. So I didn't do much on that one, but it came from my idea. So I'm happy about that. And on the weather report, David, it was snowing, then it stopped snowing, now it's raining. So now it's just going to be ice and slush. So there's that. But it's a much warmer 35 degrees today, much different from the -6 with the -27 wind chill. So it is Tahiti in Chicago right now. So I will say it that way. Yes. How are you doing, Ju?
I thought you'd never ask. I'm doing all right. My day started quite early. And I'm still going. I got some B12 vitamins that are helping me, and some prayer that's helping me. So I'm really okay. We had 2 school closures and 1 delayed start, 2-hour delayed start last week. So the kids, because it was MLK Monday and then 2 snow days, they only had school on Thursday. And the DMV, it's probably more than the DMV, right? But Maryland and all the states going further south had experienced some really, really, like a lot of snowfall. Like the past 2 years, it hasn't really snowed like that. But last week, we got pounded, which is like, a little surprising. But I learned down here that maybe they're going to shovel the snow a little bit later. So just park your car and just wait for the storm to go. Don't be a New Yorker, because it's not like New York. So either way, we are warm. Hopefully the snow will be melting. We're at 30 degrees too, and all is well in my world. All right, let's get into the topic. I didn't know what to call it today. Like I said before, is DEI dead? The rise and fall of DEI. For the purpose of today's conversation, I want to anchor it in the more recent happenings around DEI, not going back to the 60s in terms of affirmative action and all of that, even though there is some precedence here connected to it, but really around 2020, the pandemic, George Floyd, all of those, that begins the rise, right? So I just want to set it up a bit. So for those that are listening, right, proponents of corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, commonly called DEI, argue and believe, and I'm one of those people that believe, that they are important in order to retire and retain people of color, right? So some stats, right? According to LinkedIn, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officers, the hiring increased by nearly 170% between 2019 and 2021, right? This is the rise, right? And this was spurred in part by a renewed commitment to workplace diversity following the murder of George Floyd, right, in 2020, right? So then last summer, and we had a show about this, the Supreme Court ruling struck down affirmative action in education, right? Giving federal law now the space to prohibit private employees, right, higher education institutions from considering race and other protected characteristics in employment decisions. So here's where we're going towards the fall, right? This judgment basically emboldened a lot of conservative advocacy groups, right, such as America First Legal, who has taken the position that basically DEI is illegal because they embrace terms such as reverse racism, which is also on the rise. Reverse racism, reverse discrimination. And that concept really started around the 70s as well, as backlash to the civil rights movement, right? And so what does this backlash look like, the beginning of the downfall? It looks like former President, excuse me, Donald Trump saying that there needs to be a ban on DEI because it's un-American, and this was in response to a federal contractor training. He said it was un-American and it was divisive, right? And that it needed to be banned. The backlash looks like a group called the American Alliance for Equal Rights, a conservative nonprofit organization devoted to challenging race-based policies, right? They went ahead and sued a handful of law firms last year over their diversity fellowship programs. The fact that they experienced that heat, these law firms, they went back and they adjusted their fellowships to include all. So whereas it was to benefit Black and brown, because they got the heat, they went back and said everyone can apply. White people, brown people, right? Because nobody wants to be called discriminatory or racist. Right? And so more and more examples of just conservative activists, running with, we're going to call equity, or the goal to provide or equitable experiences, discrimination. We're going to call that reverse racism, right? Okay. So furthermore, right, there were companies such as AT&T, Google, Uber, YouTube, American Express, Infosys, Revolt TV, and the list goes on, right? This is still, I'm on Backlash still, where white workers have sued for racial discrimination in recent years, right? Last month, a woman by the name of Shannon Phillips, a white woman, and she's a former Starbucks regional director, she was awarded $25.6 million after a jury determined that she was fired because of her race, right? And in her district, that's where, I don't know if you remember the story about the 2 Black men being arrested in the Starbucks. That was in her region, right? Backlash. Last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, Elon Musk said DEI must die. He said the point was to end discrimination, not to replace it with different discrimination. So here we go again with calling equity discrimination, reverse racism, okay? And so, unfortunately, many white American workers may never embrace equity for others because they hold on to the belief that the gains and upward mobility of people of color, brown and Black people, right, is happening at their expense. And so I'll stop there. What are your initial thoughts around this topic?
Everyone wants to jump in first, man. look at David. I can hear his brain mediating through the thoughts.
I mean, it's a big topic. It's a huge topic. But I will say this: I think this is not coming at the right time, but it's coming at an expected time. So I think especially as we're like heading into an election cycle, and people are starting to crank up their divisive kind of language. We're seeing it happen around like immigrants. We're seeing it happen around the call to end DEI. I think that's my first thing. And then I also think that we have to break it down, because when we talk about DEI, DEI exists in both public and private sector organizations, right? And I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're going to probably see a lot more of the DEI work that's happening in private sector spaces and organizations go away, and investments pulled. It's already happening right now. My wife is a consultant. She's a human resources consultant, and we just talked about this. Like, it's one company, but still, she said that this organization that she's working for has decided to disinvest from their DEI initiatives because based on their market research, it just wasn't going to be pulling in, enough revenue to support it. They're like forecasting that, right? So that's happening. That's going to be happening all over the place. But I think we're going to see something happen in private sector. But I think, the public sector, including public education, right? Part of what you do if you work in schools, I mean, before it was DEI, we didn't call it DEI. We called it equity work. We called it data-driven work, whatever it was, around students, around hiring. Those things will more than likely still exist to some level until the pendulum swings the other way. So,
yeah. Just to
I have special thoughts about Elon Musk, which I'll hold to the end.
I just want to insert a quick fact, just for the point of comparative analysis. So, fact: the role of Chief Diversity Officer right? This is 2020, 2021 stat, right? Had become visible and more crucial than ever, with new hires tripling in 2021, right? So 53% of Fortune 500 companies had a CDO, with over 60 appointing their first ever diversity leader, right? Now, 2023, right? Tech giants like Google and Meta have slashed diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in 2023, despite their commitments following the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests and riots. According to data provided by job site Indeed, cited by CNBC, DEI-related job postings in 2023, this is as of November 2023, have declined 44%.
Those are good stats. These are really good stats. This has been like a topic that I've been hearing a ton about. What I don't think I'm that surprised about is that, like, we look at these companies, and these companies, in my opinion, don't give a shit about diversity, equity, and inclusion. What I think they give a shit about is money. And what they give a shit about is image, and what they give a shit about is profitability, right? So, like, fucking, you know, the whole France thing went down. Everyone's got a French flag behind their fucking profile, and every company's got like the French flag up, right? Then, you know, LGBTQ rights become hot, and now Nike's like, yeah, you just do it any which way you want to do it, you can do it. We're providing solidarity for our brothers and sisters. And I'm like, bitch, please, it's just like marketing shit again with you guys. And then sadly, something that I think we care about immensely, because I want to insert a couple of facts that I just recently heard to the conversation as well, is that diversity, equity, inclusion got like really hot. And I think those of us who have been like, finally, we've been talking about this shit for eons, and it was hot because it was hot just like LGBTQ issues. It was hot like the France issue. It was hot like the black, you know, screen under Black Lives Matter. And sadly, what I saw companies doing was just doing something that was hot and not understanding that the arguably psychological premise that you are going to more likely than not associate and hire people that look like you, people that come from your background. And when only 2 of the Fortune 50 CEOs are black. 2. Got 1 black woman, we got 1 black dude. That's it. And I think there's 0 Hispanics. The other 48 are white, and the overwhelming majority of those folks are men. And when you've got old white dudes running companies, the reason why we were so excited about DEI is because it's like, hey, maybe we should tell these old white dudes that, like, there's black people, Mexican people, Asian people, LGBTQ people in this country. And what Elon Musk, and I'll get into this later, and the right have done an inordinately good job of repainting diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, is saying we're beyond race, guys. This is all about merit. And what I'm saying is, like, yes, it is about merit. And when you've got Black, Latino, Native, Asian, and LGBTQ candidates that are as qualified, if not more fucking qualified than the people in charge, you don't give them a second thought, because what you are doing is hiring people that look like yourself, because that makes you comfortable, because that is where you come from. So this is a situation to get you to wake up so that you're saying, I am not basing this on race alone. I am basing this on the fact that these people have all the merit, if not more so, but we don't have any of these people here, and they have a very, very solid voice into a community that we know nothing about, and maybe we should like bring these people on. But it's just that flavor of the month that these companies want to deal with, and just be like, hey, yeah, we're Nike, just do it the DEI way. I mean, DEI is out. All right, what's hot now? We're just gonna do it in ourselves, because that's all we do. We're Nike. We're fucking sellouts. We're a piece of shit company that doesn't care about anything except our own profit margins. Yes.
Well, I think
that's my opinion on the subject.
I think that you hit on something there, Omar, and I think David asked some good questions, and I think we got to answer those questions because it's a nuanced response if we're gonna have an honest conversation. Are we talking about public industry entities, or are we talking about private entities? Because if you are a private entity and you're a publicly traded company, your job is to maximize profits. If something is clearly not maximizing profits and you don't do it, guess what we get to do to you? We get to sue you, right? Who we talking to, right? Now, in mixed company, if there's black and white and all these people in every race and all in between listening, I'm a black person and there's a code that I need to be on that. For the most part, I am, right? Things have been bad for black people, brown people. People of color is a tricky term, but I think that, you can say for the purposes of this conversation and that, and I do think that because of what has happened in the past, there's a lot of people that's behind and you need to do things. You can't do the same thing and catch people up if that's what your goal is. Now, if I'm talking to black people, if I'm talking to people in my house, if I'm talking to people in my family that I love, my whole thing has always been don't expect no help. Don't expect any of that stuff. You got to be 2 times better to get the same thing. And I'm not saying I'm not having a right conversation. Are we having a right conversation or a real conversation? Because here's the thing. Pendulum swing and they overcorrect. In the George Floyd times, there were people, like a lot of people gave a lot of guilt money. That was the wave. And then in philanthropy, raise your hand if you're somebody here that's had to raise in philanthropy. They go off of trends. They go off of what is hot. They go off of what is happening. And that trend is about to shift again. But here is the thing that we got to be honest about. If I'm talking to black people and brown people in a closed room and we having drinks, there was a lot of people that was getting over. There was a lot of people that got DEI positions off the strength of DEI positions and did not get the outcomes for overall more people. Now, David and I love to do one thing. It's called disaggregate data. We love doing it. I just disaggregated Oakland's education data. Black kids are still the most suspended. They are still the lowest on A through G completion. They are still the lowest in ELA test scores. They're still one of the lowest as far as like math and stuff like that. So if we have these initiatives and the numbers are not changing for the people that's supposed to help it, but very wealthy and highly upperly mobile black and brown people are getting these other positions, but the rest of the people is still kind of out on their ass. I think there are some people, I don't think it's just white people. I think there are some people that's looking and saying, some black people that's like, how is this getting to me? This ain't making its way to me, right? So I think we got to have a real conversation, but I do think there's always an overcorrection. Now, how do I feel about DEI changing or shifting? I don't know if I have feelings about it. I can see it in a lot of different ways. As a black person, I'm not surprised though, because there's always going to be an overcorrection. If you give me a shot, I want the shot, right? But a lot of people not getting that shot. But here's the thing though, right? But we do have to start talking about, what did you end up? What were your results? What did you actually accomplish? Did you accomplish the thing that you need to accomplish? But because it's such a charged conversation, and conversations like this tend to lack nuance. So if we're talking about on code with us against everybody else, absolutely. Don't touch DEI. Don't touch this stuff. Actually, my critique of that movement was it didn't go far enough. You were still scared to say, I'm focusing on black students or black people. I'm focusing on not just Latino, I'm focusing on Mexican people for this initiative to fill this out. I'm focusing on Native people. But what happened was you would say people of color. And guess what? The people that were at the bottom will still be at the bottom, and other groups figured out how to manipulate that. Ask Mindy Kaling's brother, right? Like, I don't know if you people know who Mindy Kaling is. She's an actress. And her brother got into med school because he checked that he was black. I think it was med school. He checked that he was black to get in, right? And he was making a point. Yeah. It's like, so I think it just depends on where we want to go with this conversation. But I love my people, and I love my people for real. So when I love black people, the black people that I know that be on that are like, we're going to build you some skills. We're going to make sure you know how to do something with your hands. We're going to make sure that you're not out here being dependent on these people. And I'll end it like this with my grandmother. I lived in the projects with my grandmama. And I said, when I grow up, Granny, I'm going to live right next door to you. I ain't never want to leave my granny. And she almost choked me. She said, she didn't choke me, she was very sweet, but she said, you will be as far away from these projects as humanly possible. Don't expect nobody to give you nothing and go out and you got to go take some stuff. You know, come back and visit me, baby, but don't live here. And I just, so it just depends on how deep we really want to get in this conversation. But when you punch, even people that I don't like racism, I don't like fascism, I don't like these things. But we got to stop being surprised as an oppressed people that when you punch and you land a blow, don't be surprised. Be ready to duck. Like, people will fight back. Those people that don't like you will fight back. And I like the fight. So let's have the fight, right? Like, but I can't then be mad when they come back and they land a blow. They landed a blow. Now what are we gonna do? Are we gonna cry about it, or are we gonna build things that actually enriches our people and claim it for ours?
Thank you for that. I mean,
Yeah,
that was gonna be one of my questions. So so let's go there. I think we're gonna talk about all of it, right? Because it's just all gonna come up. I mean, at the end of the day, I want us to land in a place, right? This is the Southstar Classroom. You come for the conversations, you leave with tools, right? So it's like, how can we support our Black and brown babies, our children, our young men, our young women? Like, what is it that we can do, knowing that the future has surely changed, right? Like, if you are, you know, a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, a 17-year-old right now, right? College admissions looks completely different for you. Right. The workforce, of course, has changed. Right. And then this is just adding on top of it. Right. But like life as we knew it. Right. Like I always tell you all that I got into SUNY New Paltz through the Educational Opportunity Program. Right. Designed for Black and brown kids from the hood. Right. I cut school for I was brilliant, but I didn't apply myself one year. Right. So I was in Burger King doing all the things. And I was grateful for a program that would look back and be like, oh, she can read, she can write. She's from the hood. Okay, peer pressure, whatever. But let's give her a shot, right? And that's one of these affirmative action initiatives, right? My sons won't have that, right? So it's like that's where I kind of want us to land at least once here. Like so the question is, what strategies can be implemented to ensure that Black and brown students have equal access to quality education, regardless of their socioeconomic background or geographic location?
good question. I think I will try to answer this. So again, you know, DEI is a relatively new term, right? Mm-hmm. But government has for a very long time been in the business of trying to quote unquote level the playing field, right? I think when we talk about like privates, you know, the private sector, they basically are, you know, held to account by their shareholders, their board of directors, and so a lot of what we see in the private sector is ultimately driven by you know, capitalism. In the public sector, you know, pre-DEI, we look at all the programs that came out, you know, like you know, post World War II, right? Those were all designed to kind of, you know, level, you know, the playing field in some way, shape, or form, leading up to the civil rights movement. And so I think, you know, looking not even specifically at education, I think one thing that we can do is, you know, it's hard to change people's hearts, right? It's hard to change people's minds. But what public institutions can do, especially in this age of DEI, because I've seen it a lot, you know, I've seen DEI programming come into schools that I've run. And I'm like, where are the outcomes? Like, what are we actually trying? What, you know, needle are we trying to move for children here? Because so much of it was focused on adult outcomes and adult feelings. Where in you know, in the past, in the near past and the present and the future, I've always been focused on outcomes for children. So I think getting to your point, Jubilee, whether we call it DEI or not, there's nothing prohibiting any of our public institutions from, especially education, remaining focused and accountable for leveling the playing field for children that attend, you know, public schools, not private schools, you know, through looking at data, through looking at graduation rates, through looking at standardized test scores, through looking at attendance, all of those things. It's the things that we've been talking about for forever, and that we'll continue to talk about, because those are the things at the macro level, help to set individual students up for success post K-12. So I think, one of my criticism that I had and I continue to have around DEI programs is it tends to be way more focused on adults and less focused on actual outcomes for children as it pertains to K-12 public education.
Thank you. Anybody else want to take a stab at it?
Well, EOP EOP and EOPS is still around. I don't think that they got rid of those at all. Like you said, they won't be there for your kids. To my knowledge,
well, they're still around. And I don't have any
the
stats.
Ivies, if you get in and you qualify and you still make under a certain amount, it's gonna be free still. You still got EOP, you still got EOPS. I think you still got, I don't know if they still doing millennial scholar stuff. They might not do that anymore.
I'm not sure. I think what I'm not sure about is whether or not the whole race piece, right? The race conscious admission decision, that piece, right?
Well, that's admissions though, right? Like, so it's like I don't know. I mean, I guess I want to make sure I'm talking about what we're talking about. Are we talking about DI? Or are we talking about all race initiatives in general? Or like, again, that's what I'm saying. It's a nuanced conversation. Like I said, as a whole on the face, if I ain't got time to explain, leave DI alone. It needs to be here, all that stuff. But if we're actually cutting it and slicing it and getting into the gist of it, here's what I tell your boys. Because here's the thing. I had AP everything at Emory High School.
Yeah.
I had a high GPA. And then my last year I transferred, and Emory was mostly Black and Indian at the time. And then I transferred to a school in Stockton. Emory had 300 kids. Bear Creek and Stockton had almost 2,000, and it only had 300 Black kids, right? Like, so went from being a majority to the minority, and because of my transcript, they put me in those same classes. So I'm back in AP English. I'm back in this, and I didn't know what a damn thesis was. So how do I have an A here? And here with everybody else, I'm not able to operate. And then I get to college and I get into college, I get accepted, but I'm remedial everything, right? Like, again, what are we focused on? Like, I tell people, like, you want to know exactly where you are. Now, there are a bunch of historic reasons why we might be behind. There are a bunch of discriminatory reasons that ain't right and it ain't fair. And at the same time, I do want to know how I measure up. Like, I want to know where it's at. So it's like, I tell my boys, like, let's not be satisfied here. Like, look, you Black and things gonna be different for you. It's not right. It's not okay. But it just is what it is. It's the same way if a 6'5" man with nice hair that looks like Omar walks into a room, somebody short and stubby gonna have a rough day. It just is. It happens, right? It's like, but you're gonna have to figure out these things. So again, you know why I struggle on this, y'all? Like, you know how, like, this is why I like the show, because I always want to encourage and lift up my people. And then you ask me about somebody I love. So I'm thinking about Jubilee and how I feel about her. And I'm thinking about her sons, who is a connection of her. Now, there's a message I could give them that could make them feel good. Or do I really want to prepare them for battle? Do I really want to do what Marcus Aurelius did for his son, where it was like, yeah, you're not going to school with everybody else. You got to be able to do this stuff. You about to get your ass kicked every day because I need you to actually survive. It's the reason why coaches' kids have a better chance of making it professionally than other kids. It's the reason why singers' kids, because they're going to go through a different type of ringer. So now, are we talking about fair or what are we talking about love? Because I'm going to have a different conversation on each. And like my grandmama said, favor ain't always fair. Meaning, when you anointed, and I ain't trying to go into a whole bunch of Black Baptist talk, but they got every aspect of this. But when you anointed, like, sometimes you get breaks, but sometimes you got to carry some things that other people don't have to carry. And I want to make sure that while we're trying to fix the world so them boys ain't got to carry the load that other people don't have to, I also want to make sure that they shoulders are strong enough and they back is stiff enough so they can do it. Like, and that is what's going to separate them when it turns into a dogfight, when people are really, really trying to survive. See, it ain't got as bad as I think it's going to get. And I don't think everybody's going to be prepared for how bad it can get.
Mm-hmm. Toya said two things. She said, "Woof, that's a loaded question. I've been working on that answer for years. Dismantle oppression, love." And then she said, "All my life I had to fight."
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. People, they fail. Many people fail to realize that if you are, I'll take myself for example. The background that I came from, my parents were farm workers. So for me and the generation of my brothers and sisters, we were figuring it out as the plane was flying. How do we move and integrate into, becoming the first generation of my family to finish K-12? How do we navigate being the first generation of my family to go into college and go into different professions? All of that. So that's 100% right. I think, oh man, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but
Go off on a tangent.
well, I was
Yes,
listening to a
please.
comedian the other day. It was an African American comedian talking about African American and Latino people and how people think that life is hard now, but like we've basically been at war the whole time, right? And so it's actually not hard. I think he might have used some more colorful language, but this is like kind of how we were raised, how we learned to adapt to like living in this world. And going back to like what Charles was saying, and to speak to the experience of your boys, Jubilee, DEI, affirmative action, EEOP or not, like we still have to teach our children how to survive. And then the next level is, are there programs in place to help further advance them, right?
Sure.
But still at the core, like we still have to do that core work that I'm doing, that you're doing. So that doesn't change.
Yeah, I think it's like, thank you for that. I mean, for me, it's both and I think that in and of itself is a burden, right? Like when people say we're flying the plane while building it or building the plane while flying it, like, because it'll be this generation. I mean, of course, it's our work still, but this generation that'll always have to carry that both and, right? Like, how do we, demand respect and dismantle oppression, as Ms. Toya said, and do all these things while also navigating through the system, because we can't separate ourselves from it, right? If we're talking about upward mobility, we still have to be a part of the very thing that's broken or was designed to be dysfunctional, so that the other people can benefit and the marginalized can suffer, right? So it's just like it's the both and. So I think for me, I can speak personally, like I'm gonna have to give the speech that Charles says, right, and that you say. It's like, yeah, it ain't fair. It's not, but it is still the plight of a black person in these United States of America. That is honestly what it is, right? I tell them, don't nobody owe you nothing. Ain't nobody gonna give you no handout. If they do, thank God, and keep it pushing. Right. Don't lower your standards. Don't go expecting it. You know what I mean? Whatever you get, you gotta earn. You still have to give them all of those pep talks, because I still know that somebody will look at them and not give them what they deserve. I know that they could be qualified or highly qualified for something, and God forbid somebody says, oh well, we're gonna pick that one instead. So I just want them to have tough skin around it. But I agree with what both of you said.
And if somebody offers you a handout, my first thing is like, it's probably a trick. So
what's the catch? What's the catch, right?
Watch your back. Gotta watch your back. I feel like Omar's writing a dissertation here. He's got some thoughts to share on this.
Subject. Yeah, man. Listen, like
also, and I found it, and Omar, I basically called you a model again, keeping my streak alive, brother. You know what I'm saying?
I appreciate you, man.
I added some pictures to you, brother, but I got you. They don't know why. They don't know.
It's like those Snapchat streaks that everyone wants to be doing and shit. Except we got our streaks right here live. Here's my barter, right? Like, I think colleges and institutions, regardless, have seen the ramifications of what happens, right? So we talked about it on another show, and we talked about what happened in California when they dismantled affirmative action, and it was 2 years at Berkeley. It was 91% Asian, dude. It's like, all right, cool. Like, is that reflective of the world that colleges really want to create? And what ended up happening was that the applications to Berkeley in those schools from people that are black, brown, even white, fell precipitously, because it's like, that's not what we want to do. We want to go to college to experience a reality that is not the reality of our hometown. Our hometown may be very homogenous. Where we come from, our neighborhood may be very homogenous. But if we got the opportunity to go to college, we really want to diversify it up. And I think college admissions counselors are there. I think Cole is absolutely right with the private industries. They're going to ride the hot wave of whatever is going to look good and make them money.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of the question of what are people going to do, I think I'm just going to come in from a different bent and say that you can use all the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. You can hire those people. You can get really hot into the topic. But if you consistently have leaders that are just white, male, raised middle, upper class, like they're going to hire those country club cats that they grew up with. And I've seen it. I've got friends from undergrad who have like started their own businesses, right? And they're like, Omar, like, I started my own business. And I'm like, horse shit. You didn't start a goddamn thing. What you did was took daddy's resources, daddy's friends, daddy's money, daddy's time, and they built you this really pretty thing that had nothing to do with where you went to college. It had everything to do, because had you gone to UMass Amherst, Cal State, Northridge or Stanford, the exact same thing was going to happen. And what those cats did, Jubilee, is go in and start hiring the country club cats that they grew up with. These are my buddies from Stanford, for Christ's sakes. And it wasn't until you get, and I mean, I hate to say this, man, but like just out of like my own intentions of starting our own organization from the ground up with none of dad or mom's like connections or help or any of that stuff. And I was extremely intent on being like, hey, these kids are majority Latino. We need to bring in Latino teachers that understand the background and reality. Yeah. So what I'm getting at is that in a college sense, Jubilee, I think you're going to have well-educated college admissions counselors that understand even the marketing of diversity, even when it just comes down to dollars and cents, as well as the reality. I think in other organizations, be them private or government nonprofit, I think it relies entirely on the leadership and relies entirely on the kind of people that they're comfortable with. And, this beckons the fact that if you look at the teacher workforce, as Cole states consistently, is majority white, female, middle class. And this is why we need to start empowering our Black and brown community to be having leadership positions, not to exclude anyone, but to finally start including those of us that have been left behind, man. So yeah, look, I'm with Toya, man. This is a really heavy-setted question, and I've been deliberating a lot on like the vacillation between colleges, private, government, industry. And what I ultimately conclude is that each are different, but it's always going to rely on that leader. And I can guarantee you those Fortune 50 companies that have white leadership, bro, I bet you $1,000 they're the ones who need diversity, equity, inclusion to force them to actually consider qualified Black, Asian, Native, LGBTQ candidates, because they're going to hire their own. If they have a choice, they're going to hire their own. And that's what I've seen. And it's sad ass shit.
And I'm going to hire listen, man, and it's the thing, though, right? Y'all got kids. Jube and David have kids. You and I do not, Omar. Not that I don't think you do, Omar. But Jube and David.
My friend jokes, not that we know of.
I'm just saying. I don't know. Maybe just don't talk about it. I don't know. But if I have a company that's been successful and David's kid, who I've seen pictures of when he was this tall, is now this tall, and I got an opportunity, you know what I'm saying? It's like, hey, David, I'm gonna, like, because of proximity, because I know this person, right? Like, listen, man, these white folks is going white folk, bro. Like we act like we don't know how power works. Did anybody see Kim Jong-un the other day? He was crying. He was looking at the birth rate in North Korea, and he saw that the birth rate was dropping. He can't get them to have more kids. He is worried about the North Korean population dying out and South Korea actually getting enough and whatever, right? You know what, though? He ain't the only person that's worried about that. There have been studies since I was a child where white people are no longer the majority and will not be the majority because they are scared of the Davids and the Omars. Like they are fearful. You know what I'm saying? Like they talk about this. Like actually, if you pay attention, if you really want to know why abortion is a big issue, it ain't because black people get a lot of abortions. It's because white people get a lot of abortions, and they need more people. Like, how deep do we want to go, y'all? Like,
I love when you go down.
This is good. Let me just insert a fact. Let me insert a fact here.
We're also 15 minutes out from closing the show.
This is true.
We got to keep the rabbit holes slightly brief.
Because this is nuance. This is intelligent people conversation. Go ahead.
I mean, it's good. Here's a quick fact, right? Around 40% of individuals. He has a child with slick back hair. You are right, Alonzo. Yes, that's it. That's it. Around 40% of individuals residing in the U.S. identify as non-white, encompassing Black, African American, Hispanic, Latinx, or Asian backgrounds. As per Nielsen data, this diverse demographic possesses a substantial purchasing influence amounting to $3.2 trillion. That's as of July 2023.
Right.
So to Charles's point.
So all I'm saying is this, right?
Yeah.
I wish that we had the type of economics as black people set up where our money traveled within our people. Try to be a black person, try to be a brown person and set up a shop in Chinatown right now. Go try it. Go try it, right? I live in a black community, and in a all black community where it's black people working at the bank, it's black people working here. You know what I'm saying? There's a different race of people that runs our liquor stores. There's a different race of people that sell our hair. There's a different place of like the economy around black people is big business. The economy around brown people is big business. And I just think that again, you can't DEI your way out of that stuff. I think that there has to be something that we have that we fight for. And I'm not saying it's going to be fair. I'm not saying that they're going to give it to us. I'm not saying that they're going to take it without a fight, right? Like, I'm not saying that. But again, we talk a lot about fighting. We talk a lot about war. We talk a lot about these things. And then when people swing back, when the ops swing back on you, you can't. That's their move. That's the move that they made. That's the move that people that want Trump made. That's the move that these white folks made. That's the move that a lot of black Republicans and brown Republicans, there's a lot of people. This ain't just white people that feel this way and are saying this stuff, right? So what I'm saying is, what are you willing to fight for? You know what I'm saying? If you assume that nobody's coming to help you or save you, what does our community look like differently when I'm not waiting for that help? It looks like if I got a company, then Davis' kid always got an internship. It looks like Jubilee's kid always has an internship. And I'm not going to feel no way about it. I'm not doing a national search if I know her and I know what she's done with those boys and what she's trying to do, and I'm trying to help it out. So, you know, sometimes you got to use that shit against them, man. I just feel like we can complain about this, and if you a white person, you can't leave that conversation without a feeling of self-importance. If every issue has to be wound up into white people need to change their mind about us, then why you think that they damn sure gonna have an air of importance about themselves? If every solution got to do with you, how about you just mind your business and I'm gonna mind mine, and let's see where the chips fall. Put us in front of each other, as Cat Williams said, boy, give us both a microphone and let's see who comes out. I think I'm gonna win. I think I'm gonna win some. I might not win them all, but I'm gonna win some of these fights, and I have been winning them, and I've lost a lot too.
So, Dave, you got something before I ask the last?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's what we call, Charles, keeping it in la familia.
Yeah,
that's what we say. Yeah.
Listen, my son, my youngest son, last week I told y'all it snowed here, so they entrepreneurial, so they came in like, Mommy, can we get the shovel and can we get the whatever, the ice pick thing to clean the car, right? Because we got hammered. So they go out, they look like little snowmen or whatever. They come back maybe an hour later. I'm like, all right, how did they go? Because I'm thinking they're gonna come back with stories about how their business works and pocket change or whatever. My son sat on the couch and he said, Mommy, nobody wanted us to shovel their snow. I said, why not? He said, because we're black. I'm sorry. I said, what do you mean? I said, who were you asking? It was like, well, it's like the white people down there, like they like own the houses down there, what have you. I said, really? I said, so do you think it would have been different, if they were black people? He said, yeah. He's like, I don't think they wanted a bunch. It was 3 of them that went together with hoodies and all that. He's like, I think they probably would have helped us if we were white. And I did not say this to him, but on the phone with a friend, I was like, I can't help but to think that perhaps if there were Black homeowners out there, maybe they would have looked at this little Black boy differently, right? Like, he's not trying to rob you. He's not trying to steal, right? He's trying to make honest gain. And maybe they would have looked like, sure, maybe you're not going to do the best job, right? I'm going to have to come back, but I'm going to give you a little $2. You can earn this here. I'm going to support, right? I'm going to support my own. So anyway, that's just a thought. All right.
When we get to final thoughts, I'll do a quick story for my final thoughts.
Gotcha. So, okay. So the final question, right, is, can a world that values diversity and inclusivity exist without the need for DEIA initiatives and laws specifically aimed at supporting Black and brown children? Yes, no, why not? And which pathways would create space for this kind of world to exist? Now,
Jubilee, it is 5:51.
I'll go first.
Let me just say this real quick, right? Because Omar today, we're gonna go to 7:04 today, but Omar talked about hiring, right? All of us have had the power to hire, right, or to eliminate roles, or whatever the case may be, right? When I think back to my time as principal, I didn't need DIA initiatives, right, to support. I had a lot of Black people, right, as teachers in my building, but I also had a fair number of white teachers in my building, right? And so I'm answering first, right? I think a world like this can exist, right? When we are looking at skill sets, right? Because really, when I was interviewing people, I'm looking, first of all, can you teach? Like, can you teach? And then the second thing is, like, do you know how to build relationships with kids no matter where they come from? At least are you willing to learn that you don't go up to a little Black girl that has beads in her hair and rip them out because whatever, she's putting them in her mouth or whatever. So I hired Black teachers, I hired Latinx teachers, I hired white teachers. And it's like, if you can serve my children, these babies, in here from your heart, and you have a strong skill set, I'm hiring you. I didn't need a quota. I wasn't trying to meet a quota, but it was really about the kids first. So I think a world like this could exist. It's just that I don't see this happening on the other side. I think as a Black woman leader in a position of power, I think that I was way more like equitable than, or made more equitable decisions than probably my white counterparts would have. Yes, I'm biased, but that's what I believe. All right, go for it. Can a world exist without a world that values diversity? Can it exist without the need for these initiatives and laws?
I'll say no. And the reason being is because what I mentioned before, I think it is much easier to change laws and create policies to modify people's behavior and hold them and like systems accountable than it is to change people's hearts and minds. Like, it's 2024. I still believe, I know that racism is still alive and well in this country, right? And the only way you undo that, that you can undo that to level the playing field, is through systemic change, because we got here through, decades and centuries of systemic institutional racism. It just doesn't go away like these people that are pushing against DEI hope that it will, right? They kind of want to do a reset, but you can't do a reset until we know that we all have, equal or equitable access to the start line, right? So I think without DEI, and I know DEI has to look different. We can have another conversation on that. But without some sort of intervention, it just doesn't happen.
Oh.
I mean, I'm going to go off on a hell of a tangent, but I'm going to be quick. When President Trump became president, he had Steve Bannon, who helped elect him president. And then what was the name of that weird leprechaun that was his attorney general? Jeff Sessions? Was it Sessions? You know what I'm talking about?
You know his name.
Weird leprechaun is crazy.
Yeah, the leprechaun man. That dude, who was literally like the Confederate leader that Colonel Sanders left behind. Those two wrote a very public manifesto, basically saying exactly what Jubilee and Dr. Charles Cole were saying, was that the United States is in a large sweep demographic change where you're absolutely right. The Latinx group is quickly gaining an inordinate amount of numbers and traction because, we populate quickly. It's not just the buying power. It's that level of minority majority frightens the hell out of white Christian nationalist folks, and they feel as if we're going to lose our country. It's not that they're going to lose the country. They feel that they're going to lose power and money. And that is really the advent of why they wrote that manifesto and those initiatives. What does this have to do with this entire topic? Is that's really what we're fighting against. Because when you've got a very interesting ideology permeating across the United States, which is saying we're going to lose power. And I think David said it best, was like, bro, we wouldn't be here today without the Civil Rights Act of 64. We wouldn't be here today without the Civil Rights Act of 68, the Voting Rights Act of 68. We had to create these laws to force the fact that Black and brown people were not allowed to vote, not allowed to be a citizen, still segregated. We had to create policy change. And it's the Republican ideology, and it's not even an ideology, it's the strategy to be like, no, like, people are good, racism's done, we're going to be okay. Like, Mexican people, you don't need that. You don't need that handout. You don't need that diversity, equity, and inclusion, baby. You don't need that affirmative action. This should all be done on merit. You're saying you're not good enough. And what it's doing is reversing the ideology to convince all of us that we don't need that stuff. And we're shooting ourselves in the foot because their ideology is keep it white. And that is the manifesto Steve Bannon and Jeff wrote to basically say, we've got to keep Black and brown people out of positions of power, because if they are in positions of power, they will start hiring and bringing in all these other people that we've never wanted to have at the table. And now that they're at the table, we're going to lose our seat at the table. And it's all about that. And that is going back to, again, I brought it up 1,000 times on this show, my best friend's mom that was like, oh, the only reason you got into Stanford was because you're Mexican. And she felt threatened that a Mexican kid took what she thought was probably the rightful spot of a white person. And there is where it lies. So I'm with David that, of course, we need policy. And I'm with Doc that, this is deep and very deeply seated. And if we don't take care of our own and move this shit forward, we're going to get smothered. And that is why I was so damn adamant about becoming a CEO, because, yeah, man, I don't just float this name up here for namesake, being like, oh, I'm a CEO. It's to prove to other Latino kids, like, you can do this too. And not just that you can do it, you need to do it. Like, I'm out here trying to create future CEOs. That is what EPLA does. We are trying to create future CEOs because I need them. And people that look like Jubilee, people that look like Doc, and people that look like David, taking their rightful place at the board or at the head of the company, because not only do they deserve it out of merit, but it's their time, because we haven't had the opportunity yet, and it's our time, man. That's why we need it.
Look, I mean, I'll meet your nerdiness and match it. I'll say in John Locke and Hobbes, in their debate, where Locke is basically, life,
super nerdy,
life, liberty, and property, and Hobbes is literally you must submit to the monarchy. I would say this: it looks like Hobbes won, but it looks like Locke won. But if you just replace monarchy with capitalism, Hobbes won like a motherfucker. So, let's just. But I'll just say this to answer the question. You asked, can I imagine a world where? No, I don't imagine these lily worlds and fields. I just don't. And but there are people that do, and I'm not mad at it. But I've just had to survive shit. I'm sorry. David's had to survive stuff. I'm
laughing because you didn't even finish saying the whole question.
Because it's just. Do you imagine? Of course, Jubilee wrote that 3-part ass question with 7 minutes left to go. You know what I'm saying? But listen, man, I want it to happen, sure. But do I think it's going to happen? But here's the thing that I do know, as somebody who's traveled this world, somebody who's been in other countries, I have seen people, I grew up in squalor, and I have seen people so much worse off than I am. So I take the blessings that God has given me, and I'm going to make these moves that I can make. The fact that we can have this show, I'm not caping for the United States, but I'm aware that we can't have this conversation in a lot of other places. I am aware that there are black people that shit on black people born here, but that are in other countries fighting to get in this country. I am aware that there are brown people in other places that will risk life and limb to get to this place that we talking about. So however I'm thinking about that, I've been pulled over so many times, man. I've dealt with so many types of racism. I deal with that shit all the time. So I'm not saying that that don't exist. What I'm saying is I want to give me the fair leave me alone and let me do what I need to do. And I know you want us to kind of go into final thoughts. So here's my final thought in the Lily world and field. The other thing I would say is what encapsulates this conversation perfectly. I asked y'all if y'all watched it. Go watch Killers of the Flower Moon. If you want to see how whiteness works, if you want to see how power works, if you think that this is something that's just happening now, look, man, they said them Indians got our money. You gonna marry into these families and you gonna kill everybody because that's our money. Like that happened at the same time Tulsa was happening. So go read it. It exemplifies it. Here's the story. We had this snowstorm, and I get this knock at the door, and it is this kid. It's this kid, this black kid. He's asking. He got a shovel, and he's on charge. So he wanted to do he wanted to shovel my door stoop, my garage, all that stuff. Because here, I don't know if you notice, if you own a home in places that is snow, if the mailman or somebody slips because you didn't clean it, you are liable as a homeowner, right? So I go out and I look out, and it's a black dad, and it's him on the corner. His son just hit my house. His other son is hitting another house, and it was the most beautiful thing that I had seen. And I grew up, in Oakland, but I was born here. I live in a black town. I live in a black and brown town, actually. So seeing that and what he's instilling in those boys did a lot for me. And, regardless of where this DEI thing lands, because it's going to go up and around and a whole bunch of different stuff. And I don't know, it's going to have an up and down. But how am I going to protect people that I love and that I work with while also trying to make this place a better place? I'm not racist people going to exist. They ain't going nowhere. They're not going nowhere even after they die because they feel like this is theirs. And when people feel like something is theirs, they fight for it. So if we want this equity, if we want this freedom, if we want this fairness, then you have to be ready to fight. Do not expect those people to lay down their arms and come quietly. And if they do lay down their arms, you better check them for a bomb. That's what I would say.
Did you let the boy shovel your
For $20, I absolutely did. I shot him a little bit more, but my gardener person that comes, that's just $70. So I will see your $20, young man. Here's $35. Take it, and I will be your best customer.
I love it.
I'll go next. So I think, like I said earlier, and what Charles just spoke on is that in 2024, racism is alive and well and thriving, right, in the United States of America. That's a fact. And so the reason that we have these conversations, the reason we talk about education, because we know even in 2024, with all the change that's happened, right, all the policy and state and federal and local laws that are in place, life outcomes for Black and brown people that do not have access to high quality education, the probability of them living a life, to go back to quote Hobbes, is likely to be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, right? And that's facts, right? You look at the data. So when people show up and this guy Elon Musk with his new his new toy Twitter show up and want to use that mouthpiece to say things like DEI is just reverse racism and it's creating more racism, is absolutely insane, right? And so I think we also have to get clear about what the word racism means, right, versus discrimination. You can call out racism, doesn't mean that is reverse racism. Those are two very different things, right? We can look at racism, we can look at discrimination, we can look at prejudice. They're related, but they're different. But just because we call out racism and it makes people feel uncomfortable doesn't mean that we are participating in the act of reverse racism. Absolutely not. And so that's not for us to deal with. That's for other people to deal with, right? That have those feelings. The last thing I'll say, which I started out with, is we're heading into this election cycle. And so part of like, being able to navigate that, if you follow the news and the media, is like, it's going to get crazy between now and November. Right. And so we saw a story, or I don't know if you saw it, but I saw it. One of these like doors that fell off an airplane, right? Terrible thing, right? Never want to be in that situation. And it got blamed in many papers as like, because this airline company had instituted DEI programs. Like a plane falls off an airplane and they blame it on DEI. Okay. Another story, a sad story coming out of, I think somewhere in the Chicago area. And it's very tragic, but this is how brainwashed people are. People are dying from fentanyl. We know this. It's a national crisis, right? It's beyond a crisis. Track it back to the Sackler family, who are not Chinese, who are not Latino. But what we see now are headlines when somebody overdoses from fentanyl. The family gets on the news, and the first thing they want to do is like, we have to close the border. We need Trump. We have to close the border. Like, just be prepared for more of those types of headlines and that kind of messaging, and just know, like, we're heading into this like a kind of hyper news cycle for the next year. And it is what it is, right? But we still have to do the work and fight for justice.
Yes.
Omar, did you go? Final thought?
Yeah, no, I think I basically summed up my final thoughts on essentially that this is not something that I think is ever going to just manifest itself. We're going to have to push it in the public policy sphere, but it's also something for us to determine on our own and realize that because this exists, what are we doing to not only engage these leaders, but this is why El Paso Leadership Academy exists. It's why it's a leadership academy. It's not just some kind of nice, sweet, nuanced thought. It's really the emergence of creating future leadership, understanding the difficulty and the circumstances out there. And like Charles said, like, we out here trying to understand the circumstances, and it's not just, hey, I'm going to have a talk with my kids about the reality in America. I'm trying to have a talk with my thousands of students about the reality so that they are well prepared to not only face it, but lead it.
Yeah.
Boom.
And I'll wrap here by saying, this word equity keeps on coming up because, like I said in the beginning, we're at a place, and maybe we never move from this place of you saying that equity really is discrimination, right? So like I go into the same, store as a white counterpart. They go through the front door. I go through the back door. They're like, hey, what's the big deal? You're both in the store. It's like, yeah, I had to go through the broken, dumbass, like back door. Like how is that fair? How is that equitable? How, right? And so I think that if you leave a jug of water in the sink and it's just dripping, over time you're gonna get a gallon, right? And that's the tool that I offer, right? Just like wherever we are in our own spheres of influence, right? To continue to do the work, to continue to pour into our babies, to continue to let them know that they're beautiful, that they're brilliant, that we see them, that they're capable, right? And like it sounds a little soapboxish, but the hate exists because so many people just haven't learned to love, but we know how to love. So I think we have the space to be able to continue to influence other people, and that's my commitment. I know it's y'all commitment as well. So that's where we'll start. That's the strategy I got. Love can conquer hate, and let's continue to be influences and lights in our spheres, of influence. And that's that.
Jubilee just so much better than the rest of us. Just so sweet. It's fucking lilies and fields. That's Jubilee. That's Omar. That's David. I'm Charles. And let Jubilee redesign your world, because it would be a beautiful thing. This is the South Star Classroom. We'll see you next time.